um, I know that you changed companies from Indian Express, right?
Yes.
So is that also journalism related, or
hmm
it is? Okay.
So, just to give you a heads up on what I've been doing since I graduated,
Mm-hmm.
I've essentially been working as a technology journalist in India. So, I've gone through various companies in my time there, and I've been doing this for almost 6 years now, since
Wow.
2011 essentially. And my job primarily, besides covering the tech news and the tech reviews, is also writing a lot of editorial content around the state of technology and how it relates to human life, and whether certain trends in tech are even of any value beyond just the commercials or just the idea of making profit. So there's a lot of in some ways the same journalistic ethic that would apply to anybody breaking a story with regards to politics or finance. The same thing applies here, because today, if you look around, technology is so pervasive in our lives. People are spending thousands of dollars on, whether it's a smartphone or it's a computer, or even if it's about automating things in your home. So there's always a question of whether that particular piece of technology is worth the money or not. But the first question should ideally be is, whether do you even need it?
Mm.
So that's kind of that's a quick um, summary of essentially what I write about, and I've worked with three publications so far.
So, speaking that you have that much experience, can you tell us a little bit about how media works in India?
In what way though?
Like versus
Works as in?
publications versus like online publication versus print or.
Okay. So in fact, it's funny you mentioned that. My first job was with a company called Digit.
Hmm.
It was originally a German magazine that came to India, and then their entire roots were in print. And over the years, as digital became more pervasive, the magazine subscription started going down. However, the reputation that the magazine had built allowed the company to create a website, and the website got a lot of traction. So Digit right now in India is regarded as one of the best publications to go for,
Wow.
whether it's online or offline, whether it's print or online rather. Um, there are a lot of so here's the Indian landscape with regards to journalism.
Mm-hmm.
Print and television still are considered the hallmark of journalism. TV even more so, because you can't make mistakes on television, right? It's
Right.
national. If it's out there, it's out there.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have print, because again, same way. Once it's printed, all you can do is print an apology the next day, but there's no guarantee that anybody's gonna read it.
Right.
So that's true. So it requires considerable amounts of good research and due diligence. With online, we have the luxury of publishing something, and if we get something wrong, we can always go back into our CMS and edit it out. Um, Worst case scenario, somebody gets a cached snapshot of it, but it's not that big of a deal,
Mm-hmm.
right? So these are the three tiers of journalism in India. Now, here's the problem: television is becoming sensationalized in India.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Print subscriptions are going down because of the prevalence of online, the ease of access, right? There's also this notion that I don't need to pay to read the news anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So over the month, I'm not paying as much in subscription fee for a newspaper. So what started happening is that a lot of the newspapers now also not only have an online edition, but they also run independent websites.
Mm.
So, for example, my previous employer, the Indian Express, which is a number three newspaper in north of India, they have a website, indianexpress.com, right? And it's not just the newspaper edition, but it covers a whole gamut of news. Let's say if there is a particular news that breaks,
Mm-hmm.
online gives you the flexibility of doing five other stories around it, which you don't have the luxury of doing in print or even on TV for that matter,
Right.
because time and space on the paper are limited. So, online is the future moving ahead. But the real challenge has been, how to make money off of it. One. and of course how to also maintain the quality of the content on there.
Hmm.
You know, so that's kind of where we are right now in terms of journalism.
So, in evaluating the media on
Mhm.
online publications,
Right.
what does freedom of the press or safety censorship or media ownership look like?
Um, as of now, the Indian media has enjoyed pretty much a free voice, whether it's any of the three mediums for that matter. Uh, However, there have recently been cases of a few journalists dying for. I mean, there's a lot of conspiracy theory around it, right? But at the end of the day, we'll never really truly know. However, let's talk about specifically the online space.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the Indian judicial system, you have something called libel, right? Libel, however it's pronounced.
Right.
Sorry, I've been in India too long. so, um, so what that allows a person to do, let's say if I'm writing about a company like Apple, right, and I write a negative piece about them, they are in full right to file a lawsuit against me, um, saying with the charges of defamation, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Now, once that case is filed, um, it is up to me to defend myself, right? The case could be thrown out because I presented a good defense,
Mm-hmm.
where I was able to present enough evidence to back up my claim in the story, and also prove that my remarks were not inflammatory, right? So those are two very essential aspects. So what that essentially means is that um, up until, let's say, about 3 years ago, this legal loophole, I guess, was not being exercised in its full right. It was only being done so by the political parties, for political coverage. But now, if there's any negative news, there are a lot of newsrooms are afraid of publishing because they want to make sure that if there's a negative piece going out, which could attract a potential lawsuit. And you have two kinds of lawsuits in India. You have a civil case and a criminal case. So there's a whole bunch of legal. You can be slapped with both of them at the same time, in which case it just gets worse. And generally, the person filing the suit against you will demand like an exorbitant amount of money in return. A lot of times, these cases get thrown out because the journalistic rigor still maintains the fact that you need to back up whatever you're writing. That's one thing that segregates um, online media from credible sources versus just somebody running a blog,
Mm-hmm.
or somebody who's just started out on their own. Because if you get hit by a lawsuit, not only are you looking at lawyer's fee, but you're also looking at potential loss.
Mm-hmm.
So there is, and therefore it's very important for any online journalist in India to be very mindful that they're not, trying to propagate personal agenda or biased views, or just kind of taking pot shots at somebody who did not want to play nice with them. So there is, as such, no censorship, but the Indian legal system does provide some protection for people who are being written about, people,
Okay.
companies, whatever. So it wouldn't be censorship, but yes, it's a checks and balances situation.
Right. So, in regards to our First Amendment, with journalists having their right to press and all of that,
Right.
would you say that it's similar in a sense to those
It's
journalists in
very
India?
similar. Very similar. I mean, there are there have been instances where even though certain aspects of the government could have been shown really, really bad light, exposés essentially, right?
Mm-hmm.
And publications in India have gone ahead with it. Be it in fact, the company that I worked with, the Indian Express, was one of the media houses that worked on the Panama Papers and the Paradise Papers that were just leaked recently.
Mm-hmm.
So that way, there's full freedom of the press, but there is always the concern of so in India, unfortunately, there are other means that you can resort to that are outside of the legal purview to kind
Mm-hmm.
of take care of things. So that's something you do have to worry about when you get into really high profile stories.
Mm.
But then again, other than that, I think the press is pretty well protected.
Would you say that they're less protected than those being written about?
Mm, so I don't have a journalism background, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if this is taught in journalism schools in India or not. But every newsroom that I've been a part of, one thing that I've always been told by my editors and my seniors has been whoever you're writing a negative piece about, reach out to them for a comment
Mm.
and give them a deadline. Say 1 day, 2 days. If they say no, I need a comment that will have to come from corporate, needs at least 2 weeks. You negotiate on the deadline and you weigh in the time sensitivity of the matter, and then you take a call on whether you're going to go ahead with a no comment or decline to comment, which are two very different things. And or you will put whatever comment they say they would like included. So there are these things that we try to balance our coverage with.
Mm-hmm.
um, there are certain situations when the other party just refuses to answer, which in personally as a journalist I believe that's their loss, because if they're not willing to get out with their side of the story, then what's even the point?
Right. So, can you tell me a little bit about the barriers, limits, and achievements in the media in India?
Uh, so barriers will always be bias.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, uh, I mean, you guys know this better than anybody else, right? You read favorable coverage about one political party and you say this is bias versus the opposite view. So we'll not even go there. So, and that's something, in the Indian political system and the entire coverage of the politics is there's so many parallels between the US and India, not just from the way things are being run, but also from how they're being written and how the public is responding to it. So we've got all three of those covered. But so that's one barrier, right?
Mm-hmm.
Bias. The second barrier as a reader, I would say, is not truly knowing which of these publications is giving me an unbiased opinion,
Okay.
right? So I think with regards to publications like Washington Post or New York Times, they've kind of established that impartiality. Unfortunately, in India, that's not been entirely the case,
Mm.
because every publication has had a history of either watering down a story or playing out a completely different aspect which turned out to be false. So, without getting into any specifics, so that is one significant barrier. What we do enjoy the luxury of is a massive population which now is starting to come into the digital age. So, in the last 1 year, India has gone through this massive transformation where one telecom company has essentially put another 10, 20, 30 million people online in India, in the rural, from the rural sections, right? So, you've got a lot more eyeballs, so you've got a lot more people reading your content. As a tech journalist, I won't say that's entirely true, but yes, as from a journalistic perspective, there are a lot more people going to a particular website to get news. So that's extremely good. So the digitization aspect of the entire population of the country is worked out in our favor.
So, would you say, speaking that technology is on the rise, would you say that there's an inequality in affordability in that?
Well, absolutely. So when you talk about inaffordability, right? India is one of the cheapest countries when it comes to internet access. I pay about $2.30 for 1 GB of 4G data on my phone.
Wow.
Okay. I have this phone currently has about 48 gigabytes of 4G data on it. I'm not even kidding. Yeah.
What the
So
heck?
it's super cheap, and in fact I just had one of my writers research on how much it costs for a GB of data around the world,
Mm-hmm.
and India is one of the cheapest, and it's getting even more cheap.
Hmm.
So that way connectivity is becoming a great asset for anybody who's in the business of creating content, creating anything online, is now tapping into a massive market. So it's no longer that much of a challenge. It would have been a year ago,
Mm-hmm.
where we were starting to hit ceiling points with the amount of people we could reach out to. But now with smartphones and 4G data essentially becoming so pervasive, it's the whole landscape has changed.
Mm. Did you have a question? Yeah, I was Hi.
Sure. Hi.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I was wondering what publications in India that you
Mm-hmm.
would warn readers about to maybe stay away from being publications that are known to marginalize stories and fabricate them.
Um,
If you're allowed to say
all,
any names.
I would not be able to take any names
Oh,
because
okay.
that would be a serious breach of ethics.
Okay.
Um, but you could look online.
Okay.
What I would say is there used to be a time when websites like BuzzFeed had a reputation for not being newsworthy,
Right.
but more viral worthy. But that's no longer the case. BuzzFeed has one of the best news divisions, and they've really come very well in the last 1 year. India too has similar websites that try to take on news stories, but try and do them in a viral way. And what that results in is a certain coloring of the issue, whether it's overplaying it or whether it's downplaying it, and there's often a bias as well. I can talk about issues though. Sometimes the issues of gender equality
Mhm.
get colored. The issue of politics is always going to go through that bias. Um, when it comes to independent websites, now when you talk about websites being run by newspapers, they have to be a lot more careful with their voice because um, they are going to be held to a certain journalistic integrity by their audience. When I go to BuzzFeed, I'm just like, I really don't care if it's accurate or not because I know it's BuzzFeed, for example. But when I go to the New York Times or when I go to Washington Post, I know what I'm going to read is supposed to be unbiased. And if I find out that it's not, then for me, the company's credibility takes a
Right.
serious hit and they lose, a potentially paying subscriber. So
And
that's
yeah, go on. I'm sorry.
so that's basically the difference between the two types of publications in India.
Gotcha. And you mentioned Digit was some um, publication you worked for that was a really good credibility. Um, what kind of journalistic background did they require? Was there really that much
So,
requirement for
being
that?
Technology Magazine, they
Uh,
required people with two skills essentially. One, a good command over spoken and written English,
okay.
and three, or rather two, would be a sound technical knowledge about one aspect of technology,
Mhm.
whether it's PC components, whether it was cameras. So cameras was my specialty.
Mhm.
I wrote essentially just about anything that had to do with imaging,
Mhm.
um, and successfully predicted the rise of Instagram back in 2007. So these are the things that are essentially required. So we covered with Digit, we covered every aspect of consumer technology,
Okay.
and every writer had to have one specialty that they would demonstrate through prior work or rigorous interviews with the various members of the team and the editorial board.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi. So, do you have an opinion on any main changes in the media over the past few years, or any future expectations?
Wow. I think the media plays an extremely important role in all of our lives, right?
Mhm.
A lot of what we know about the world comes from sources we call the media, whether it's, let's say, Discovery or National Geographic, or any of the news websites, anything, right? So
Mhm.
I think it's extremely important that the narrative be built in a most unbiased way possible so that the reader is getting information and not a view.
Mhm.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So the idea being there's a lot of news being written today that sounds a lot like op-eds
Mm.
and not like news.
Right.
So I'm reading some, on a daily basis I read about 50, 60 articles from all walks of life. And it's become, over the last 7 years of doing this rigorously, it's become very clear where you're hearing somebody's voice versus where somebody's stating fact.
Right.
So I think moving forward, especially given how polarizing times are becoming, it's extremely important for a lot of the media houses, a lot of the authors, to kind of establish themselves as a neutral voice, the voice of fact, rather than an opinionated writer who's always going to, either support the right or the left, or support, consumer capitalism or Marxism, whatever. It's extremely important to be able to do that, because if your audience is not going to think that you're an unbiased person, they're never really going to value your opinion, and you're never really going to change minds, and you're never really therefore going to be able to affect real change. And I think as journalists, that's one of the most critical aspects of what we do, that we need to be able to form public opinion that can affect real change.
Do you mind if I ask that one?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask.
Okay. Oh, this one?
No, I was gonna ask on this
You
one.
go ahead and ask that one. I was gonna ask that one.
Okay. So, is there anything that you would like to change in the media?
Wow. I really wish we could go back to, maybe like publishing one article a day, because
Would be easier.
the way the publishing business unfortunately works is, there's a lot of cogs in this machinery, and which basically start at, you need to churn out about 20 or more articles a day as a collective publication, right? And not a lot of them hire a lot of people, so it becomes very difficult sometimes to write well-researched articles or articles of real value in a day. Sometimes you're just putting stuff out there because you have to put stuff out there.
Right.
And I think that's a trend we really should start looking to change. And since the online business thrives on, advertiser money or subscriptions and things like that, so I think the whole business model essentially needs to be relooked at. Personally, that's my opinion. Because I would much rather do one quality piece a day, which is not only informative but also educational for my reader, versus just somebody who's coming in, he's like, you know what, I've seen this on 5 different websites. Because news is news, right? If tomorrow there's a new Secretary of Education elected, everybody's gonna say this XYZ person was elected as the Secretary of Education. Now, but what if one publication was to do a full dossier on this person? Say, hey, you know what, this was elected, but here's what their qualifications are, essentially. And that takes time, that takes research. So, but everybody has to publish.
Right.
Because at that moment, it's news and it's so-called trending at the moment. So that's when people are most interested in reading about it. So
Right.
there needs to be some fine balance, I think, between those two aspects.
Do you have an idea of what a fine balance could possibly be?
None. To be honest, I've struggled with it. Every publication I've worked with, we've all struggled with it. And I think I don't have a business background, so I couldn't truly comment on it. But I'm pretty sure that if better people put their minds to it, they could.
Did you for
Sorry, I wrote a bunch of questions down.
One moment. Did you need that stories personally he liked it covered in India, but to show around the world?
No, would personally, like, preference-wise.
Okay. So hi again. So what are some stories you would personally like to cover about India and other parts of the world?
So I think one area where India plays a huge role globally is the sciences. We've got engineers all around the world who are working on cutting edge technologies, whether it's genetics, whether it's regular medicine, whether it's engineering, whether it's space, astrophysics, whatever. But even at home, we've got some really, really amazing scientific projects, and India partners with the premier agencies around the world. So science is personally my thing, right? And that's kind of what I want to look at and write about, how Indian scientists are now playing a key role in various fields to change the future, essentially.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Also, what are some influences from other countries or regions in their own media and storytelling practice?
Influences, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
From other countries.
Yeah, from other countries.
Okay. So, personally, so while I was at Soka, I used to read The Onion a lot.
One more time. One more time.
The Onion.
When I was at
Oh.
SOCA, I used to read The Onion a lot.
Oh, The Onion.
And,
Okay.
and honestly, it's very funny if you read their articles. They do start with fact,
Okay.
and they build the comedy on it. That really taught me how to separate a voice from fact, and I think that worked out very well for me. But I really do enjoy reading the Post, Washington Post.
Yeah.
That's again a very strong ethic personally that I like to follow in terms of writing. Even every day when I read it, it teaches me something new.
It's unbiased.
Um,
Yeah.
I subscribe, and then there's I don't know if you know this guy Casey Neistat on YouTube.
Do you know?
No.
I don't.
Okay, so he's a YouTube guy. He basically started his channel 3 years ago, and every day he puts out a video.
Every day.
Every day. And he did that for about 2.5 years, till one of the companies that he had started was bought out by CNN, and they have this huge media plan, and he's been working on that. So he's no longer as regular on his own YouTube channel, but it's really amazing how this one guy, from nowhere, just started working on films because he wanted to make films. Did shows for HBO, and then started his own YouTube channel, and all he does is talk about daily life, his life, stuff that's going on, and of course stuff that's going on in the world. And it's impressive how he's able to mobilize so many people to act on something, and every video of his gets millions of views, and there's a lot of people who take away really positive messages from whatever it is that he has to say. And the best thing is, it's all from daily life. There's nothing extraordinary happening every day in his life, so that's fairly impressive. So the idea is that you've got one is storytelling, which can influence people. You've got reporting, which can again also influence people when it's unbiased. And through all the medium that I've been a part of, it's the most important thing has been how do you affect the change through whatever it is you do. So you've got the Onion on one hand, you've got the Washington Post on the other, and then you've got a YouTube blogger on the other hand. So 3 aspects, but the idea that is consistent throughout all three of these entities is the fact that they're able to actually make the reader or the viewer think about the issue that is being discussed.
Yeah.
And that's something I would personally really like to be, better at.
Right. Yeah. Did you have a question?
Yes, I had a follow-up on that, actually. So, what do you think other countries, what influence do you think other countries have on your publication, per se, if any?
A lot of back and forth happens again with the idea of integrity of what we write. And there are certain things, most of it comes down to research, to your sources, and how you maintain your sources. And that's a skill that we're always, as a community, trying to be better at, because we're living in a very polarized time. Either you have certain situations that everybody's got access to everything, and then there are certain situations where nobody has access. So the idea is, how do you find a source who can give you something that nobody else has? And that's what journalism has always pretty much been about. We all love scandal. So that's essentially the idea. And when we do read international publications, and some people in India will obviously match the standard. We've got some really
You cut
amazing
out.
journalists. Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah. You were
Okay.
wrestling around.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
You're okay.
So there are plenty of journalists in India who have worked with many international publications,
Right.
and they've come back and they've taught us, how things are done there, and of course they've also taken their knowledge from here. And because let me tell you this, when it comes to people skills, Indians are probably some of the best. We've talked our way into any and every place imaginable on earth. That's the kind of skill we have. We guys are so amazing at public relations, it's not even funny. So, so we have that ability, and we take that abroad when we go and we write for other publications, which helps us develop sources. So it's, I think in terms of what we look forward to is one, a writing style
Mm-hmm.
that's newsworthy, that's journalism worthy, and of course this idea of the journalistic ethic where you're able to balance out what should and should not be reported, because that's equally important. You don't want to cause mass panic, right?
Right.
You don't want to do something stupid just because you have a great story. So these are all learnings we get over time, speaking to journalists, seeing what others are doing, so on and so forth.
So I like to end every interview with these two questions. Before I do that, I think Alexis had one more question.
Yeah. So this is kind of like, I guess, an ending question as well. What do you think about future generational journalists and the media? Are you scared for viewers for the future and readers, or do you think there's a lot of hope in the industry?
Wow.
I know it's kind of generic, but a general question.
No, it's actually a very very good question, and I'm trying not to go on a rant here.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, sorry. I'm just like trying to like tighten that one up, but it was, I don't know. I mean, like we could focus on India. We could focus.
Anyway, I
Yeah,
think the
anywhere.
problem is universal. So
Yeah.
let's start with this. Today's generation, like you guys, you have access to a smartphone,
Right.
which is a photography device, a video device, and an audio recorder all rolled into one. 20 years ago, somebody would probably have to spend north of $1,000 or $1,500 just to have those three in his pocket. And even then, everything would be very bulky. So, you guys have it super easy,
Yeah, everything's.
which makes reporting for you super easy. There's the California fires, SoCal's all lit up right now, right? And you could literally go to an area that's accessible to you and talk to families there, and you will walk away with a ton of content, right? Now, here's the problem. Without journalistic training, you do not know how to push that content out. You have hours of footage. You can't upload all of that. You will edit it together. As a journalist, I would make sure that if my story is about how people are losing homes, that's the narrative that comes out, and not how people are losing homes despite having insurance and insurance companies are faltering. You know what I mean? Um, so, controlling that narrative comes through training, and it comes through a lot of rigorous practice and, again, a guide. And that's kind of what's missing with a lot of today's generation. Where, okay, you're at the fires, you've done a Facebook Live, but then what? This is what's happening. Everybody knows this is happening.
Yeah.
But what? And that's the idea. That's where the training, the formal training comes in handy, where you're able to make something, or rather derive something of importance out of an event and convey it to your reader or your viewer. And I think that's the real challenge. It's great that you guys have so much access, because it means that as a reader, I will have access to more content. I will have access to news that I wouldn't have thought of having access to 20 years ago. But it's always the concern is going to be, is there a bias in there?
Yeah.
Is this an untrained person? What is their credibility?
Yeah.
And for a journalist, the credibility is of the utmost importance.
Right.
So,
Yeah. No, thank you. That's perfectly answered. Thank you.
my pleasure.
Hello again. So, one of my final two questions is, what do you think the biggest story in India is right now that no one is writing about?
Wow. Oh boy. I think personally, there's not a lot that we're leaving out. Recently, yes, there have been a few journalists who lost their lives in seemingly suspicious circumstances, but that's not being written about mostly because it's all under investigation.
Right.
So that's a completely different aspect. But
Mm-hmm.
what I do feel is missing is coverage on our sciences or coverage on our educational programs, because that's something that we're a huge country. We're like 1.75 billion people,
Right.
but they're not all educated. And why are they not all educated, right? So
Right.
tracing the path of the funding that the government gives and what finally the schools receive. Where are all the sinkholes? Where is that money going? Things like that. I mean, general welfare topics, are not receiving the kind of importance as they should, and it could be attributed to either one, the apathy that could be prevalent in the country, or as part of on the reader's part, or it could just be because journalists are not willing to invest the time to write about it. So I think that's pretty much it. But I think overall, to be honest, the publications have been doing a fairly good job of not leaving any stone unturned with regards to the issues in the country so far. It's kind of overwhelming, to be honest.
Well, there's a lot of journalists.
There are. We're a big country. We need them.
So, is there anything that you thought I would ask that may be important?
No, actually, I'm fairly surprised. You're very thorough, the two of you, with your questions. I mean, I was expecting a how did you get there, and to which I would have said, I was looking for a job, and it just kind of happened. But yeah, I think with regards to the line of questioning, it's been pretty damn good.
Well, good.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking your time. I know you had a long day.
It's alright. I'm used to 18-hour days. College does that